everyone. Welcome to Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm Marissa B. And today I have as guest speaker, Jenna Wilson. Jenna is a certified birth doula. She's a licensed midwife. She's also a licensed certified professional midwife. She's a Reiki master, and she is a 7 Cups of Consciousness practitioner. So there's a lot of questions today, Jenna. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I'm really excited to chat with you and share.
I'm so thrilled you're here. There's so many questions I have. Can you tell us, first of all, I'm going to let you have the floor and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to all of this, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So I really feel like getting into the birth world was one of those, like my soul was searching for a purpose, and it met with kind of divine inspiration. And I feel so lucky to be in a profession that feels like a passion and a calling as well. And it truly was that. It was a friend said something to me in a conversation once in a nightclub, a tame one, but it was in a music venue, and we were talking about women's roles in society. And I was talking about how, like, the softness and the nurturing aspect of kind of like the feminine image. So this was in 2007. Something about the style then just seemed pretty androgynous and not super feminine. So we were talking about femininity, and she said, "Gosh, you sound like you would make a great midwife." And that was the light bulb moment. Um, I was born with midwives present, so that role has always been kind of part of my story, thanks to my kind of 18-year-old hippie mom. And so it was a really kind of natural flow, a natural step into the birth world. I did become a doula first, um, and took a couple of trainings for that, and really kind of springboarded into the birth community where I was living in Santa Barbara, California at the time. It was very active. There were a lot of doulas and like study groups happening, and a website that was like a referral website. So that's also why it feels like a universal calling, because it's one of those things where you dive into the deep end and you're like in the current and things are lining up. And that was how it felt. And it felt really good. And being new at something is challenging, but I just had such an open heart to learn, and feel so grateful to the parents that let me learn with them and support them.
Now, can
So
you,
I was a doula for a few years. Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask you. Can you explain? First of all, I
Mhm.
know that I prefaced birth doula because I do, though I don't know the difference, and that's what I want to ask you, but I know that we currently have also death doulas. So I know that they're out
Yeah,
there as well, or transitioning doulas. They have different terms, but you were and still are a birth doula. Can you explain what that is and how it differs?
absolutely. Crudely put, if I may, just kind of, it's a funny little one-liner of how to differentiate the two roles. I like to say that a midwife takes care of things from the waist down, and a doula takes care of things from the waist up.
Okay.
And it's so much more than that.
Mhm.
But for me, that's just kind of a fun little way to think about the differentiation of clinical care.
Mhm.
So, a doula does not provide clinical care. So their scope of practice is very informational, um, emotional, even spiritual type support. It can be hands-on. So a lot of doulas will provide massage. They will suggest different positions, even in the pregnancy and definitely throughout the labor and birth. So it's not that a doula is just kind of like standing back and saying, good job. It can be really hands-on, but it is a support role that is not assuming clinical responsibility. So doulas will work with families that have hired a midwife or an obstetrician that takes the clinical responsibility. So the midwife does hold, typically in most states, a midwife holds some form of licensure. The certified professional midwife is a national certificate that I received, as well as being licensed in the state of California. So for families that have low risk pregnancies, meaning one baby, head down at the time of birth, no major clinical complications, in licensed states, midwives can be primary care providers. So when I was working with a group practice in California, we were really well integrated with the medical community there. So if a client needed or wanted an ultrasound, we would send them to, we had a couple different options of where to send them. We could order our own labs. So, parents could get blood work done. We could order all the medications and supplies that we needed to attend a home birth. So that was really nice. And I'm experiencing an interesting contrast right now because last year I moved to the state of North Carolina, where certified professional midwives, remember they're nationally certified,
Yes, national.
but the state of North Carolina does not recognize that licensure.
See, I don't know
So
how
right
it
now
is here.
only
I don't want to speak out of turn.
it's actually the
here,
same in New York.
Yeah, because I'm
New
in
Jersey.
New York, but when I
Yeah.
was having my daughter, I'm on the border of Connecticut. And the first thing they asked me is, would you like a midwife to attend with the physician? And they said that just in case, she will follow your progress. And just in case the physician is attending another birth, the licensed midwife can come in and she would be taking over. So, of course, I had both because you just weren't guaranteed who was available. So we went through the entire thing. But because I was giving birth in Connecticut, not in New York, so I don't know what the rules are. And I don't know if they're the same as when I had my daughter, but
sure. I think for a while now, New York, it's certified nurse midwives that are only able to attend home births legally. As far as I know, I'm not a state by state expert, but I think that's the case in New York. So similar to North Carolina, however, I think nurse midwives are pretty common in New York, at least in certain areas. And there's not a lot of nurse midwives in North Carolina, as far as I've
they have
discovered.
They have a birthing center. So everyone was going to the birthing center. So you were in that facility. It was, so everybody would be at the birthing center, including the mom that was giving birth. So there was never a question of, I'm sure that if people wanted to have a home birth, they were doing that as well. But this was more if you were going to be going to the facility because they had it set up as a complete birthing center.
Yeah, it's great to have options. So the practice that I worked with in California, we ran a birth center as well. It was freestanding, so it was a few blocks from the hospital, and we attended home births as well. Our clientele was about 50-50. And then there was one hospital kind of really for Santa Barbara County. And it just was really nice to have, the birth center was kind of like the middle ground option. Sometimes people lived in the rural part of the county and wanted to give birth a little closer to the hospital. Sometimes they lived with their in-laws and didn't want to give birth, with family members on the other side of the door. So my kind of like stance and goal is informed decision making. So I'm really passionate about families understanding the information and like making decisions based like with information and then based on feeling too. So like what feels right for them. And as a doula, most people are planning hospital births. And so even though I chose home birth for myself, I still feel really passionate about providing support for people who are planning hospital births, and no judgment on those choices. Sometimes there's clinical reasons, sometimes that's where they feel safest, and support is super important.
No, I mean, I believe in informed decisions, and I believe that you should have options. And I know for myself personally, even if there was a question of home birth, they were giving me every possibility. But then I had a very early labor. My daughter was a micro preemie, so there was no having her at home. It had to be in a facility, which I was grateful that they had a facility with everything.
Of course.
So, but I know that,
absolutely,
as you said, the informed decision is definitely paramount for an expectant parent. And
yep.
Yeah. So,
and there's time and a place.
Right. But you're incorporating a lot of things now, right? I mean, you're offering a lot of certs. I know you teach as well, correct?
I do
currently.
Yeah. So when I left California, I definitely needed to and was excited to kind of revamp my career and my offerings to families. In 2016, I experienced the unexpected loss of my husband. It was a flying accident. And that really kind of catalyzed a lot of things. It obviously was a very emotional, grief-stricken time in my life. And it also kind of opened for me and gave me the opportunity to see, excuse me, see other aspects of life. I'm going to need to clear my throat for a second. Sorry. Sure. I know. Hold on.
You okay?
Sorry. Well,
no, that's okay. That's okay.
I know, it's like, I'm not emotional, but I have a tickle. But it's all in there.
But I mean, it was a tragedy, and like you said, unexpected. And again, I'm so sorry. And of course, that does make one look at everything, correct?
Absolutely. And I experienced some really amazing opportunities to experience like the other side of the veil, really, to just put it straight. I received messages from my husband, and the way that kind of like opened up my relational thinking about relationships and what happens after we die. I started noticing some really interesting information coming in with birth when I was attending births. And one of the most poignant experiences I remember was within the year after my husband had passed. I did take 4 months off of work that I was really grateful for, and then was eager to come back. I could only sit around grieving for so long. And probably in those first few months back, I was on my way to the birth center to meet a family in labor, and I knew that there was another midwife already there, but I was heading there quickly to join this family having their second baby. And I lived up in the foothills, and I remember like driving down, and just as I reached the flatland, so about halfway to the birth center, I was maybe 7 minutes away, I just received like, he's already here. Just so clearly, this message and information, and almost like a feeling. And sure enough, I arrived at the birth center, and the baby had been born 5 to 7 minutes before I arrived. So again, she had another midwife with her. She was like well taken care of. But that was really profound. I really noticed like these messages coming in. And I've played around with that more. I've received actually formal training in kind of connecting with the other realms. That's the 7 Cups of Consciousness practitioner training.
I was going to ask you what that was all about.
Yeah, so that's a really wonderful teacher named Alea Dow,
Hmm.
and she is an energy healer and spirit guide sound healer. She's been doing her own form of this work for 30 years,
Wow.
and I'm in her first cohort of trained practitioners in her modality, and it is incredible. It Her work actually was really pivotal in helping me integrate the loss of my husband, um, and giving me direction to connect with him and to integrate the purpose and the spiritual lessons. So that's a big focus of my work right now too, is working with families to recognize that we're all here like learning
Hmm.
things. And when things don't go the way we hope,
Hmm.
hopefully it's just like a small thing, like, oh, I had to get induced and I wasn't planning on that.
Hmm.
But like all of these things teach us things, there's surrender, there's compassion, there's empathy. Like our souls are here to learn these big lessons. And parenthood is such a profoundly transformational experience.
Isn't it
So
just?
combining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about like your experience in, yeah, like acclimating, like learning how to integrate your birth experience and
And
raising your daughter.
take it from me, for a person who um, wanted to have everything organized and everything going to plan. Once that happens, you realize you have no control. There is no control, and you do kind of have to give in to what's
Exactly.
happening and go with it,
Yeah,
which is a very big lesson.
it is. It's not easy for a lot of people. So I work with families to really cultivate inner tools. So tools for connecting with that inner
Mhm.
groundedness so that when things do feel swirly and out of control and disorganized, whether it's the endless laundry piles or endless dishes or trying to conceive a second child and
Yeah.
like the kind of formal term for that is unexplained secondary fertility.
Mhm.
There's all sorts of big and little things that can be out of our control. And so I really work with families to cultivate that center, trust, and even trust the untrust.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
not about like spiritual,
Trust the
yeah,
plan that you
trust.
don't know about.
Exactly. And trust the anger and trust the disappointment and the grief. It's not about kind of like toxic bypassing or, toxic positivity.
Mhm.
It's really like let's meet what's happening, how you're feeling, and then like where's the grit and the traction, and like how can we almost like mine a diamond out of this
Mhm.
kind of pressure situation.
Now, do you think um were did you have that type of feeling or connection prior to your husband passing? Were you already on that path, you think? Or is it
I was already on that
passing?
path, definitely. I had worked with Alea Dow, my teacher, as a private client for years, actually. So definitely was aware of like the spirit world and some of her these really they're like guided visualizations
Mm-hmm.
and energy work was definitely in my sphere and in my lifestyle. I mean, I remember creating like a magic get home safe potion
Mm-hmm.
when my mom traveled to Ireland for 2 weeks when I was probably 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like magical realm connection, intention, mindset has definitely been part of my life. Um, and then that point of losing my husband and kind of what has come after has definitely expanded it, deepened it and broadened it, and really ignited my passion to share it with other people.
Mhm.
Experiencing death close up, whether it's someone you know or even like near death experiences. That I just listened to a podcast recently about someone sharing their near death experience and what they've learned from that.
Mhm.
And a lot of what they shared was like parallel to kind of my main takeaways of this experience of connecting with my husband, and a belief that we are here to learn things, and there's it's like a gym, and there's like, after this heavy duty spiritual workout that we're doing here in Earth Gym, we get to go to like the soul spa.
Yeah,
And so my
the
husband,
eternal location. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, my husband showed me in a dream that not to fear death.
Mhm.
And so my takeaway from that dream was like, well, if we are not going to fear death, then there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mhm.
And that's like a deep knowing in my body. I definitely, like, in this transition of moving to a new community, and wasn't like the smartest financial decision I've ever made. And there's fear, there's like, oh my God, what if it doesn't work out? Or there's kind of like surface, I definitely engage in the matrix a little bit.
Mhm. I think we all
But
do. We try not to, but I
exactly,
think we all do to some extent. Yeah.
exactly. Deep down, I can tap into that profound trust and understanding, and like openness and willingness to just learn and grow and be ready to let go. Like if it doesn't work out and I have to move into my mom's basement, there's lessons there and I'm willing to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But now,
So
how did you come to
that's
decide to come east? How did you're from the East Coast, correct? You're actually from the East
it.
Coast originally.
I grew up in Massachusetts. And I moved to California like right before I turned 20, and then moved back here right around 40.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like I'm, like, is that a 20-year pattern? Like, where am I going to go in another 20 years? But again, it was kind of one of those like spiritual
Mhm.
listenings. A friend owns property nearby and lives there part time,
Mhm.
and lives in Santa Barbara the rest of the time. And
Mhm.
I was friends with her in Santa Barbara, and she was telling me about this area and just how it's kind of like a nicer, slower pace of life,
Mhm.
and like a homesteading lifestyle, and really community oriented. So I was really craving community. And I was really busy in my job in California, and love being a midwife.
Mhm.
Um, but I was a widowed solo parent,
Mhm.
and I was relying on my dad for
Mhm.
on-call childcare, which for a few years was logistically fantastic.
Mhm.
And then my dad got cancer. And then my landlord gave me notice.
So everything
So
is moving in a direction for you.
everything was moving in a direction of doing something totally different. And I needed a break. My nervous system was burnt out. And so again, it's like that freedom and just kind of like surrender and trust.
Mhm.
I listened and just really paid attention for months of like, where do I go? Where do I go? I'm very visual, and I visualized a map of the United States, and just all the energy just kept coming back to this area. And so I moved out here with no place to live and no job, and a 7-year-old son.
Wow.
I did have some savings, but it was a leap of faith.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know that I would recommend doing things that way again, and I probably will try to plan things a little differently. Um, but I landed. I'm renting this 2-bedroom house from someone that I knew from Santa Barbara who I ran into in rural North Carolina when we were here looking for housing. And they own this house and they were looking for new tenants. I mean, it was like we met,
To
we
be.
saw the place, loved it,
Mhm.
signed a year lease like days later. So that's like the manifestation,
Mhm.
the energy, the like trusting the universe kind of mindset that I live by,
Mhm.
and that, not 100% always, but that is the default really. And when I'm not there, I'm like growing through something. And that's what I'm really passionate about sharing with families, is like it's all just learning and growth. And when the baby, gets into a sleep schedule and then the sleep schedule changes
Mhm.
because they're in a growth spurt or whatever, like how can we support parents to be able to show up for their kids' changing needs, and recognize that they are needs and they do change,
Mhm.
and create like a sense of support and attunement and understanding so that parents can have that kind of flexibility in their life and their mindset, um, so that it can feel flexible and fluid. Not to say it's going to be without stress, because
No.
it's kind of a natural stressor, like it
And we're
pushes
on
us
this
to our
plane.
edge.
We're on this plane of existence. So there will be some stress at some time. But you're
Exactly.
taking all of your
Exactly.
experience that you have, all of your years of experience, all of your certifications, licensing, and you're combining an entire package for a family currently, really is what you're offering.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. So I'm offering coaching packages. Um, Really work best in 3 or 6 month increments.
Mhm.
And depending on where people are, it can be really nice to, if they're in pregnancy, it can kind of like meet people and support them through the labor and birth
Mhm.
experience. So it's like virtual doula services, but there is that energetic, kind of spiritual, intuitive coaching aspect that's really unique, that I'm really excited to offer and have seen some really profound shifts. And it's gentle. It's just like, oh, looking at a little blockage here. Well, let's see. We can kind of like tap into the root a little bit, and let's say it's insecurity because your soul truly does have a mastery of self-worth,
Mhm.
but we're working on that security piece in order to cultivate the self-worth. So let's just do a little energetic work in the energy fields, kind of call back, activate that
Mhm.
self-worth piece. And then people are, feel a little more full um, in their center, and then can bring that to their parenting experience.
Right, move forward, yes. And you offer this not only virtual but even in person, correct? Because you're
I
doing,
do.
yes.
I do. Yep. So I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and it is a super fun, um, hotbed of energy work
Yes.
too. Yeah. So I'm offering doula services,
Mhm.
Reiki
Mhm.
sessions,
Mhm. Which
and
is
I
so
am looking
wonderful for
for
pregnant moms. I mean, very wonderful
exactly,
for pregnant moms. You don't
exactly.
realize it, how wonderful it really is. Um,
Yeah.
that you have
Yeah.
to at least
Super
treat
fun
yourself.
to work with kind of like the dual field too of like mom and baby,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
really kind of like getting a lot from each and how they work together. And then there's a really amazing organization called Homegrown Families
Mhm.
here in Asheville. that provides childbirth classes.
Mhm.
So I am doing
Right.
in-person classes. We're actually about to launch our first virtual series
Oh, wonderful.
um, in a few weeks. Yeah, so that can be, you know, worldwide.
And so
Um,
can you provide me with that information? I'm sure some people will ask from the audience, and then I can put it in the description information so they can actually be in touch with you.
Absolutely. So homegrown families, it's homegrownfamilies.com or .org. I actually don't know it off the top of my head, but it's a really simple like Google search of homegrown families Asheville will get you to the website with all the classes. And we're really evidence-based focused and advocacy focused. So helping families recognize that even though they're not an obstetrician, they're not an MD, they're not necessarily an expert in like the medical field, they are an expert in their own bodies and their own experience. So really bringing the locus of control kind of back to families, because it's a really kind of gnarly power differential oftentimes when OBs are saying, you have to do it my way, otherwise something really bad's going to happen, which isn't
Yeah,
always the case.
I know. I know. Sadly, not every state and every town and every city has people in the medical field that can work with all kinds of understanding. It's difficult to
Exactly.
find sometimes. I mean, I was fortunate. I had a wonderful OBGYN. He was high risk, but he was brilliant and very open to everything and, very understanding about everything. And not everybody is like that.
Exactly.
And it
Yeah.
can be
And bless
difficult for
their
families.
hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing the best they can in the paradigm they're working in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
And
anyone would
we're not
intentionally
saying
do
not to have
harm.
a doctor. We're not saying anything not to have
Exactly.
traditional medicine. Follow your progress, follow your or your child's growth. You're not saying that, but you're saying that this is complementary and
Absolutely.
right and helps families. Really, it really doesn't hinder them. It helps them. It helps them to understand more themselves and grow, and definitely a service that's needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. It's like hiking the Himalayas. Like most people, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to just show up and start walking. Like you do research,
Mm-hmm.
you probably hire a guide or a Sherpa, and really like know your route and know where you're going to stay and know what equipment and gear that
Yes.
you need. So that's what doulas do and childbirth education classes do, is really help you be prepared. Because if you've never done it before, there, there's a lot to learn.
Yes,
A
true.
lot of people in classes start out saying like, we don't know what we don't know. It's just like overwhelming. And so the more support you can bring in, the more you can kind of take down the notch of that overwhelm.
Oh, sure. And that being overwhelmed often brings a lot of stress, and you do not want to be in that
Exactly.
state of mind when
Exactly.
you're pregnant. That's a
Yeah.
definite. And you certainly don't want to have that afterwards either, because now it's no longer just you. Now you have someone else
Yeah.
that you're responsible for. So you really have to try to not have, I mean, stress is going to come along, but you have to try to have the least amount of stress as possible. And often when we have answers or when we have someone to turn to, then we don't have that stress or that heightened of
Exactly.
a stress level. So
Exactly. And when the stress comes, I would say in pregnancy, it's also the mom and baby too, because there's actually lots of research that shows that the baby experiences the mom's emotions. Emotions release hormones into the bloodstream. The baby is in the bloodstream. So it's really important when stress does come to down regulate.
mhm.
And oftentimes the right kind of support is what can kind of like shorten that stress cycle and not have it become kind of like chronic toxic stress. So the right kind of support down regulate that stress cycle, and that actually builds resilience. And that shows like a pregnant mom, even in pregnancy, can model for her baby that stress cycle and that down regulation, and teach, like kind of start even
Yes.
hormonally teaching the baby how to down regulate and how to manage stress.
So much to learn, isn't there? Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we thank you for being out there and doing this work, because it is really
Oh, it's
important.
my pleasure.
And
Yeah.
so where do you go from here now? So you're doing classes, you're offering the service, and do you think you're going to stay in North Carolina for a while?
I'm not sure. I actually just visited Santa Barbara. We got home last
Uh,
night. We were in Santa Barbara for 8 days.
mhm.
Actually, nine. Our flight was delayed for 24 hours. So again,
Oh,
like, surprise! Thank you, universe. I got a
yeah,
free bonus day in Santa Barbara.
yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it feels like home to me. My body and soul love being at the beach.
Mhm.
My son does too. But again, it's like I'm listening, like what am I being called to do here? I'm here. I have commitments. I am building here with some doula clients and the classes. Um, my son just started second grade, so I'm not like packing up a U-Haul tomorrow. So yeah, just really listening and really feeling excited about continuing to build community here. For some reason, I feel like it's going to be a really great fall. Um, and yeah, just really passionate about living to the fullest and getting out there, experiencing new things, meeting new people, um,
It's certainly
shining
a
my
beautiful
light.
place, certainly a beautiful place to do that. And of course,
It
anybody can
is.
reach you, and anybody can reach your services online as well. So we do have that
Yes.
to look forward to.
Yeah.
And again, I will definitely put all that information down
Awesome.
for the
I'll make
audience.
sure you have the links.
Thank you. And I thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming and taking the time today to talk to the audience, something so important like this, and to explain everything to us, especially people who
Oh,
had no idea really what to look for. Now at least they know. They're armed with some information, and they can search and seek out what they really need.
absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you again, Jenna.
100%.
It was wonderful to see
No.
you and speak with you today.
It was an honor and a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I will speak with you soon. Bye
Okay.
now.